You know, I watched Joe Biden sign these executive orders, and I'm just being honest and straightforward. You know what it reminds me of? Some old guy sitting in a senior citizen home just signing away. He doesn't really explain anything other than a few sentences on a card that's given to him. He doesn't take serious questions from a real press. They're controlling the press, and the press wants to be controlled. They wouldn't put up with this with Donald Trump for 2 seconds. He has now signed, as I'm speaking to you, and it'll be more in the days ahead, 43 executive orders and executive actions. 43. Most recent presidents have signed that many or about that many in a full year's time. He's done it in a couple of weeks. And these are not just executive orders reversing what Donald Trump did. These are substantive pieces of legislation that never were treated as legislation. And one of those pieces is going to affect many of you in the suburbs. The President warned you about this. Stanley Kurtz was on this show. Stanley Kurtz was on my Fox show. Stanley Kurtz was on radio explaining what the Department of HUD is going to do, really in twisting the Fair Housing Act. I believe it's of 1934, 1938, taking its words and twisting it in a way that does not support what it wants to do. I think it's 38, actually. And so the federal government will nationalize zoning decisions, housing decisions, school decisions, transportation decisions, decisions on where parks will go, libraries will go, all kinds of stuff for the suburbs. And this is what people are going to be up against now. You know, Joe Biden just sits there with his mask on, makes it act like he's just doing the right thing. He's a moderate. He is the most radical president now we've ever had. In the first 2 weeks, he's the most radical president in American history. He just destroyed women or girls or female sports. He just destroyed our immigration system. He's destroyed our border system. He's destroying our educational system. He is siding with the teachers' unions against the little kids who need an education. And I can go on and on and on, and they're not done. They want to pass this $1.9 trillion COVID bill, the vast majority of which has nothing to do with the pandemic. $250 million is going to go again to the teachers' unions and their schools because they're not teaching. They already have about $70 billion that hasn't been spent yet. Chuck Schumer's bragging about $30 billion for mass transit, the vast majority of which is going to go to the New York City Mass Transit Authority, MTA. The Democrats are very excited, the left, that this is a massive payoff to the base of the Democrat Party. It's a massive payoff to the mayors and the governors to help them wipe out debt that they created even before this virus existed. A massive redistribution of wealth from Republican states, Republican areas, Republicans generally, to Democrats, Democrat cities, and Democrat states. As I've talked about before, this is what it's all about. Well, let's watch together as Biden signs 4 more declarations or proclamations or fiats, legislation that hasn't even been passed yet. And of course, the Democrats in Congress are so thrilled and excited, and they have their own plans, as we'll get to in a moment. Let's take a look. Go.
I believe this nation and this government need to change their whole approach to the issue of racial equity. Yes, we need criminal justice reform, but that isn't nearly enough. We need to open the promise of America to every American. And that means we need to make the issue of racial equity not just an issue for any one department of government. It has to be the business of the whole of government. I'm not promising we can end it tomorrow, but I promise you we're going to continue to make progress to eliminate systemic racism, and every branch of the White House and the federal government is going to be part of that effort. This first executive order is a memorandum for the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development to redress our nation's and the federal government's history of discriminatory housing practices and policies. Next executive order.
Stop there. That's the suburbs. That's not addressing racial discrimination in housing. That's a war on the suburbs. He's about to sign the executive order reinstituting the plan that HUD had put together to basically devour the suburbs and the outer burbs. And that's what he's doing. I don't know if he knows he's doing it. It doesn't really matter. He is doing it. Go.
Reforming the incarceration system by eliminating the use of privately operated criminal detention facilities. Third executive order.
So why would you eliminate privately operated criminal detention facilities? What does it have to do with race? This is something the left has been pushing for a long time. Why? Why do we have privately operated prisons? Do you know why, Mr. Producer? Because we don't have enough room in the government-run prison system. And so by eliminating privately run prisons, you're going to put a lot of criminals back on the streets. That's what you're going to do, because the federal prison system is at peak. And it takes a very long time to build a federal prison. It takes a lot of time to get the appropriation. Not so when you build these private prison systems. And so what's going to happen again is you're going to have a whole lot of criminals on the streets. You know, it wasn't that long ago when we were talking about victims' rights, when we were talking about sentencing guidelines, when we were talking about throwing the book at criminals. Now we're not. And I'm going to put this all together for you soon, because every one of these executive orders, there's a reason behind them. So first we have the HUD that is going to destroy the suburbs. Then we have eliminate private prisons. Why? Are they doing something wrong? No, it's just get rid of the beds. Okay, next.
There's a memorandum for the heads of executive departments and agencies. Tribal consultation and strengthening nation-to-nation relationships. And the last executive order is condemning and combating racism, xenophobia, and intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States. I think the country's ready, and I know this administration is ready. Thank you.
Mr. President, what you talking to Vladimir Putin about?
You.
He won't take questions. He will not stand up to a press conference. He won't take questions. He certainly won't take questions from any reporters he knows is going to be tough. All right, what's he doing here? What's he talking about here? You would have no idea by listening to this or watching this. You would have no idea by the reporting on this. I'm studying a number of areas of our society, of our culture, what's happening to them, and why it's happening to them. This is critical race theory. It's passively called identity politics, but it's critical race theory. This was an ideology that was developed by a relative small number, a handful of Harvard and Stanford law professors. And to cut to the chase, here's the bottom line. It's the 1619 Project. America was born in slavery, racism, and white dominance, and there's nothing that could be done effectively to fix these institutions. Nothing. The civil rights laws were really laws that were passed to, in many ways, accommodate white privilege. These are the arguments. Well, why would you say that? Because it temporarily quieted people who were concerned about their rights in the minority community and so forth, but it really did nothing effective. Brown versus Board of Education, again, was an effort to neutralize the minority communities, particularly the black communities, and their demands for equality, and now we call it equity. That the white supremacy, systemic racism, white privilege, these are all phrases born out of this movement. Now, by white supremacy and systemic racism, they're not talking about the Klan. They're not talking about neo-Nazis. They're not talking about these nutjob groups. They're talking about you.
Want to see more? Sign up for Levin TV.